Thanks, Matt. Good morning, everybody. All right, am I the last speaker before lunch? No? Okay, good. Listen, I thought, I want to just kind of frame Digital Nova Scotia for you a little bit, and then first off, frame the topic we're going to talk about. So we're the industry association for the tech industry here in the province. We have about 2,500 members. If you're not a member, I would say it's easy to join up. It is free if you're an individual, and you can get on our mailing list. We have a mailing list of about 13,000 people, and we send out a weekly newsletter. We have a podcast. So if you just want to find out what's going on in the industry here in the province, digitalnovascotia.com is a good place to start. In terms of framing the discussion, we just wanted to give kind of a quick overview, first off, of what we think is happening due to AI in the economy, with a focus on employment in particular. So we'll get into a little bit of that with some numbers. Then we'll talk a little bit about where we could see some possible future scenarios going, and then maybe some things that we need to think about to make sure that we're ready for the way the future may evolve. I'll also apologize in advance. So some of the numbers we have are US numbers where we don't have good Canadian data, but we've tried to use Canadian data wherever we can. So I will just jump in. Who's heard that AI adoption in Canada is only at 12%? Because I know I've heard that recently. There was a Microsoft study out a couple of weeks ago that said it's at 37%. This study is from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business from last month. And they're saying for the companies that they look at, 45% are using Gen AI. So either the numbers are changing really fast, or the questions aren't the same. They're a little bit inaccurate. I don't know. I think what I would kind of say is that I don't think it's 12%, just based on the people that we talk to, the businesses we interact with. I think the adoption has been growing really, really quickly. And my guess is that the use of not just Gen AI, but if you looked at all forms of AI, it's probably well over half of all businesses, right? And there's some that are kind of using it explicitly, but you may be using it implicitly. You know, you're using Photoshop to take a human out of a photo or whatever. That's AI. So I think AI is really permeating industry in a very, very broad way already, well beyond what you see there. And one of the really interesting things here is if you look at the larger companies there, the 100 to 499, the share of businesses using AI is 78%, and investing in AI is a little bit less. So they're probably starting to hit maybe a little bit of a peak, like they've done a lot of the investment. And now that's starting to slow down a little bit versus what we see in the smaller companies where they're still growing their investment in AI. So some interesting stats there that are Canadian and quite recent. Julia kind of mentioned this earlier, but how people are using generative AI is actually changing very, very quickly. So if you look at the left side of the chart, 2024, you see kind of the workloads ranked from 1 to 15. You look at the right-hand side of the chart, you look at 2025, therapy and companionship is the number one, which was, kind of way down the list in 2024. Actually, it was number 2, but you do kind of see those shifts. So as people start to learn how to use AI, they learn what it can do, and the capabilities of the products change. They get better over time in certain areas. We're starting to see that, there's a lot of shifts, and maybe it's every 6 months. I mean, it's really hard to keep up with the way that these things are shifting over time. So even if you think you know what AI is being used for, 6 months from now, 12 months from now, what we're seeing is that the workloads that people are doing are actually changing quite significantly over time. So that's got some interesting implications, I think, for the job market. So is AI creating or destroying jobs? I think we've all got some theories. We've got anecdotal evidence. We've talked to somebody, a teenager who can't get a job at McDonald's, let's say. I don't know, right? But if you look back. So who here is a secretary? Any secretaries in the audience? No. Anybody have a secretary here in the audience? Probably not. So if you look back in history, just look at PC adoption as an example, and kind of that early wave of digitization of businesses, what we saw is that it created new opportunities. So lots of jobs that were traditional jobs went away, like secretaries, but that change in terms of PC adoption created a lot of new jobs. And so you can look at lots of different technology adoption cycles, and you'll find the same factors are at play. So, things that shape the speed and scale of adoption: do you have a labor shortage, or do you have enough labor? In the case of PCs, did people have the PC skills that were needed? I remember when you wanted to get your Novell certified engineer, your Microsoft certified engineer. It was a huge industry in terms of training people and moving through, those programs that, maybe 20, 25 years ago. And then you would see that the shape of the jobs inside organizations were also changing. The kind of tasks that needed to be completed, for example, the kind of jobs that were being created, where you saw the hiring, where you maybe saw, downsizing or roles being phased out. So if I change PC to AI, we think we're still seeing the same effects. The specifics are different, but at a macro level, we think AI is creating opportunities, and it's also going to, create areas where we don't need as many people. And so that's kind of the concerning thing, or maybe the opportunity as we look at the future of the evolution of the job market is where will things be, how will they shift, and what do we need to do to be successful to kind of maximize the economic opportunity and impact of that shift. So are we creating or destroying jobs? That was the question I asked. So let's talk about the job creation story. So what are the fastest growing roles? Well, unsurprisingly, AI and machine learning specialists, big data, fintech engineers, cyber, farm workers, delivery drivers, nursing professionals. If you look at the numbers, you see there are a lot of new roles that are being created. So the World Economic Forum is saying 170 million new jobs will be created by 2030, but 92 million will be displaced. But that leaves us with a pretty sizable net job gain over the next, let's say, 4 to 5 years. 69.9% of Canadian businesses expect no change to employment levels after AI adoption, and 7.3% will actually increase employment levels. So, I think there's some really interesting positive news, positive perspective when you start to look at some of these numbers. Also, if you look at core AI job creation, the World Economic Forum estimates that the global economy added 1.3 million AI-related jobs in 2 years. And 5.9% of Canadian job postings had mentioned AI. So this is data from Indeed, and you can see the share of Canadian job postings that are mentioning AI has started to grow significantly since 2024. I was at an event, a venture capital event, about a year and a half ago, and one of the founders, one of the CEOs said, "I don't hire anyone that doesn't know AI," right? That's one of the first questions I ask in the recruiting process is, how well do they know AI? How do they use it in their jobs? And so we are definitely seeing AI as being something that is a skill set that is required for a lot of jobs. We think that number is going to keep growing significantly in the future. But let's talk about the other side of the coin, job displacement. So we've got a number of different sources here. You've probably seen the headlines recently. I think Meta was the latest that announced a huge layoff. So McKinsey is saying AI and robotics could theoretically, I say theoretically, automate 57% or more of all U.S. work hours. Is youth unemployment that we're seeing today, the high youth unemployment rates, and that's not just a Canadian story, by the way, 14.3% in April, is that an indication of an impact of AI, or is it something else that's going on? StatsCan has said coding-intensive occupations with 3 years or less experience, so the kind of the entry-level coding jobs, fell by 60% in Q3 of last year. That's somewhat concerning. There's another story, though, behind those numbers. So I know this chart's a little bit hard to read, but what this chart is saying is if you look at two different sort of subsectors, one is software developers, one is customer support agents, the darker lines that are kind of heading downwards, those are the early career lines. So we absolutely, in the statistics, are seeing in jobs that could be automated through AI, a fairly significant drop in employment. The other interesting part, though, is if you look at the lines that are going up, these are the mid and senior career level jobs. So we're seeing more demand for mid and senior career professionals versus entry level. And we actually do other labor market surveys. We work with our members on that. We're seeing exactly the same thing. So when we ask our members, where do you see the biggest gaps in terms of getting talent for your businesses? Mid-career cybersecurity actually is sort of at the top of everybody's list. Senior cybersecurity, mid-career AI, data specialists. These are roles that are tough to find, and there's a lot of competition for them. So we are starting to see this kind of divergence, if you will, in the employment market. So there's another element to that, though, which is, well, where could this be going? And so this is U.S. data, the Iceberg Index developed by MIT and the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. I'm not going to go through every little bit of information on the slide, but the core idea behind this slide is there's what we see in those numbers that I just presented. That's the part of the iceberg that's above the water. What's below the waterline with an iceberg? That's the part that's really dangerous. And so what they are looking at is what percentage of the workforce could potentially be automated out of a job, but hasn't been automated out of a job yet. And so U.S. data, but they're saying roughly almost 12% of the U.S. labor market is exposed to AI replacement. So there's what we've seen already, but if you believe these numbers, there's another shoe to drop. There's another part to come to this story. I would say if I was translating this to the Canadian market, we're probably a little bit less of a knowledge-based economy than the U.S., so maybe our exposure is a little bit less, but I would still have that concern that there is future jobless placement to come based on exposure to AI. Let's do a quick reality check just to kind of summarize that. Oh, the bill didn't work. Okay, well, never mind. Is AI being adopted? Yeah, but it's mixed. Is it already causing mass layoffs? I would say in Canada, probably not. The Meta layoffs make headlines, but I don't think we're seeing that widespread impact yet in the Canadian market. How is it affecting hiring and work in organizations? Well, I've kind of mentioned that. We're seeing more demand for AI skills, and there are certain professions where we are seeing decreased demand, particularly in the early stages. Are employers expecting future workforce reductions? Well, it's not super clear. I would say, generally speaking, most are saying no, but there are pockets where they are expecting workforce reduction. So we're not seeing like a doomsday scenario yet. I think we're seeing a kind of a mixed, and we need to sort of see where the data ends. So in terms of the future, I don't know if anybody's done kind of long-range future forecasting, like looking out 5-10 years, but you could imagine that there are two broad scenarios. There's one which is the happy scenario, lots of AI job creation. Yeah, so people have moved, they've maybe been reskilled, but they're working in areas where they need to use AI. There's maybe the more dystopian scenario, which is that the iceberg index is true, maybe it's even worse. There's a lot of layoffs, and there's really serious economic impact. And so as we kind of sit in this room and we're thinking maybe 10 years out, what are some of the things that we would want to do or we'd want to be thinking about to kind of avoid the scenario on the right side of the slide? Anyone here ever do any backcasting or ever heard of that term? So backcasting is a way that you can sort of take a future scenario, describe it, and then work it backwards to say, well, what are all the things that we need to start doing or stop doing, all the things that would have to be true to get to scenario A, B, or C. And it's actually a great strategy exercise for an organization if you want to start to think about the capabilities or the things you need to be building today to account for or address future situations. It's used in the military, it's used in policy. Canada actually has a fantastic group called Policy Horizons Canada. It's part of the federal government. And they do a lot of this work. They actually have a team that does this. The Australian federal government has an office that does this. The U.S., obviously, it's embedded in the Coast Guard, the military, the CIA. So you can actually think about the characteristics of those future scenarios and start to think about how should we address it. So the Policy Horizons Group, actually, our federal government, released a paper this year. It's about a 30-page paper you can find on the federal government website, where they've actually done a lot of this work, and they actually talk about some of the policy implications around AI in terms of the longer-term approach. So, to kind of summarize maybe some of what they're saying and some of our thoughts at Digital Nova Scotia, the first thing we think is we got to build trust in AI. Right? And back to maybe the idea of explainability. If you can't explain it, how can I trust it? I worked at Microsoft when we were number 2 in the market in terms of mobile phones after BlackBerry. And I can tell you, when the iPhone came out, the trust scores on the iPhone were pretty incredible, right? And so there are lots of examples that we have in the technology world where we see that the broad, let's say consumers, the broad set of citizens, when they trust something, when it does what it says it's going to do, they will adopt it. And I think that's a risk in the AI world, is if we don't have the trust, if we can't explain what it's doing, that will impede adoption or diffusion. The second thing we need to do is think about what are the policies that we need to promote innovation, to promote adoption. We would suggest that we probably need a light touch on policy. I think we don't want to sort of clamp down on innovation. Extend maybe existing laws or use existing laws where they make sense. And let's think Canadian, right? We're all on Team Canada here. So if we can procure Canadian products, if we can protect the IP that we have, we think we should be doing that. And then the final thing is develop the skills, right? And, I look at, my kids, they've gone through school. They've all had computers, right? When I went to high school, I didn't have a computer. And so it's got to be broad. There's got to be broad adoption of AI skills. I think that'll help with building trust. But I always have a tough time when my kids' teachers say, "Don't use AI." I think, well, that's not the real world. Nobody in business is saying don't use AI. We're saying let's use AI. Let's figure out how this works. And so we do need that broad skills development across the whole industry. And get another slide that doesn't kind of work. So, and I got 2 minutes. So let me skip right to the conclusion here. So I would just say 3 key takeaways. I would say from all what we're looking at, AI adoption is absolutely increasing, but it's not increasing in a way that's homogenous across the economy. So the maturity's uneven. Businesses are experimenting, and that leads us into the fact that the labor market story is a little bit mixed. So, new roles, we're seeing areas where there's less hiring going on, and other areas where there's more hiring. So, we're kind of in the early days, we think, of how that's going to play out. And the biggest risk, really, we think, is not layoffs, but lost opportunities. So if we don't do the things that are required to get us to the happy scenario in the future, we might be faced with a version of the world where it looks much tougher, where there are more layoffs. And so we've got to do things now to build trust, to build skills, to get the right policy framework in place, and so that we don't kind of miss the opportunity that's driven by AI adoption. So the world is it's not predetermined. This is the last slide, but we got to invest in AI skills, protect and redesign the entry-level pathways so people have a way to get into the industry, measure the new outcomes, avoid AI as a default headcount reduction tool, create implementation of governance roles, and reinvest the AI gains into the areas of economic and social need where we think they're going to make the most sense and have the biggest impact. And with 43 seconds left, that's me. Thank you. Hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Cheers.